Hello, 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 and welcome to a Monday Favourite 5. Best way to start the week, I think. My name is Debbie. I am a mixed media artist and I live in North Germany. You will see that I've got a few videos up now. I think it's about 60 actually, which happened in the space of a year. So lots to see if you're into mixed media artist and mixed media art. And artists, of course, not judging. If you're into mixed media in any way, shape or form, this is the place to be. If you like what you see, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. I love to read your comments and I do try to respond to each and every one of them. And please subscribe. Consider that as well, because that really helps my channel and it helps me to bring more art goodness to the YouTuber verse. Let's say that's a new word. We'll have it. I'm having it now. Now that I've said it out loud, I'm having it. And if you like what you see here and want to see a little bit more, consider joining me on my Patreon, which all of the details are in the description box below. Right, favourite fives. My favourite fives is a little series that I invented where I choose 5 colours from each sort of mixed media set and make some swatches and a little sketch for you. Now, for me, that's really difficult because I have full set syndrome and I want all the colours all the time, as you can see from here. And this week, I would like to look at Caran d'Ache Neocolor II, and those are the ones that are water soluble. Let me just go into that. And first and foremost, as you can see, I've got them in these cute little boxes, which I found on Amazon actually. If you just search for small tin boxes or tin boxes, most of them are quite small. So if you say small, you'll get tiny, like pill boxes. You don't want that. You want these. They fit them in perfectly, and there's a little window. It's a bit flimsy, it's plastic, but it gets fairly well looked after, so I'm not too worried about that. However, they're not too expensive. They are made from some sort of very thin tin, and they're perfect for putting these into some sort of colour order. They stack, they go into my drawers, and it's all happy. Right, so today, gosh, I would have had that for a when I say favourite 5, I also allow myself one honourable mention because I can never manage just 5 of a colour. I've done okay today. I've got 5 plus an honourable mention, but I just saw this one. I'm thinking I really wish I had have chosen that. But actually, what I'm going to sketch for you today, it's not relevant. Caran d'Ache Neocolor II are water soluble, so they are a wax pastel. It shouldn't go together, those things, the idea of wax being water soluble, but indeed it does. And the thing I love about these is they're great to take outside if you're wanting to paint and draw outside. They're kind of little watercolour sticks. Not huge amounts of pigment, to be fair, so they allow quite a subtle layer to be put down. And with mixed media products, they fall into one of a couple of categories. I could roughly categorize everything as either being substrate or layers or details. Those are the 3 ways I would approach mixed media art. So for example, the substrate is what you cover the white paper with. So that might be gouache. For me, most often it is. It might be Ecoline markers, like these, for example. If I just grab one here, that, watercolour markers, any sort of watercolour marker. So I've got some here from Albrecht Dürer watercolour, from Faber-Castell, or Ecolines. They all make a great substrate. Then you've got watercolour itself. There's Japanese watercolours. There are all sorts of things. And even in some cases, you've got Inktense pencils too. The world of substrate goes on and on and on. And then you've got your layers, and into that I put coloured pencils because that's where I add quite a lot of detail. If I just grab this work that I was working on this last night. So I've started off with gouache underlayers, then I've built up with other, the substrate is gouache, then I've built up with coloured pencils, and then finally the last category that I mentioned was detail, and that's where markers come in. Acrylic markers and fine liners, India ink, dip pens, all of those come into that. And what it does is gives a really, really rich sketch with lots and lots of, not bright colour necessarily, because I'm very much a muted colour advocate. So, you know, it gives you lots and lots of lovely rich layers in whichever brightness you would like to have. Right, so the point of that was substrates are what you put down first. That's what gets rid of the white paper, and Caran d'Ache Neocolor II come into that category. So what I do is I will put some colour down. I'll show you in the sketch in a minute. Put some colour down and then blend it out with water. A couple of things there. The blending out with water changes the structure of this wax pastel, and it means that you can then go over the top with other layers. You can use this dry too. You don't have to dissolve it with water, but if you do, you may find you're up against a bit of an oil slick. However, that can work if you want to create any sort of resist for different techniques on your pictures. So there's plenty of ways you can manipulate that. Excuse me. Here again, I've got a deep dive on my Patreon, and I mean a really deep dive. I basically tested these with every single sort of mixed media tool that I own. Excuse me. Obviously, I was fine until I tried to say something. I have tested these with every single mixed media tool that I own. Coloured pencils, markers, liners, everything. Gouache over the top, underneath, next to it, whatever. And you can see that on my Patreon to get a really, really deep dive as to what these can do. Now, before we start, one other thing, to not mix them up with Neocolor I, also by Caran d'Ache. Very similar looking, except Neocolor I have got this little band of dots here. You can see there's lots of arrows along here, and what that means is as you wear the pastel down, you can tear that piece of paper off and still have something to identify it, because of course the name is on the band and the colour as well. Neocolor I have the same sort of thing. They've got black arrows this time, just so you can sort of minimally tell them apart. Otherwise it can be a bit difficult if you're just grabbing for one. And of course, once you tear down past this part, you've got the band of dots. It's important because these are not water soluble. The Neocolor ones are just wax pastels. They are not water soluble. Neocolor II are. Very, very important if you're after a particular effect and you think, oh, right, I'll dissolve that out with a brush. No, you won't. So we're concentrating on these today. This is my collection and how I keep them. And I have got a few colours that I've pulled out of this lot with great difficulty. I'm sure you heard the screams from where you are. It caused actual pain, but I have narrowed it down to 5 favourites plus 1 honourable mention. Okay, and here they are, which is an odd sort of selection probably. It's because I would like to do a very quick sea sketch for you today. If I go back through some of these, there have been a few. No, this was the light fast tutorial that we did, and then there was an ink tense, and there has been a gouache. That's one of my favourites. I adore gouache. And luminance, Caran d'Ache luminance. So you get the idea. This is what we're after. We make a little swatch of them, and then I show you how I would use them in a sketch. So for starters, I have got one salmon, then I have got beige. Now I have had constant arguments with this pastel, you can just imagine, because I call that warm grey. It calls it beige. Let's do beige since that's what it says, but I use it as a warm grey. This one's umber. This one is light cobalt blue hue. And when you see the word hue in brackets or even without brackets after the name of something, it means it's an imitation of that. Now, cobalt is not a safe thing to be exposed to over long term. So what a lot of these very clever and sensible companies have done is they have imitated that colour. So that means it's a safer one to use, and it reaches safety standards. So so look out for hue, like cadmium hue. is better than cadmium, especially if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. English red and indigo blue. I love a nice indigo blue. I could have chosen Payne's grey, but everybody chooses Payne's grey, so I'm here to promote indigo blue. Now, I love these. You just need those. You need a brush. And if you're out and about doing things out in the wild, so to speak, one of these water brushes is fabulous. And that's what most artists who do that use, because you've got your water with you. However, I'm in my studio in the safety of, so I'm going to use just a round brush. Okay, so it's a matter of laying some pigment down onto the paper. I'm using a Stillman and Burn hot press sketchbook here, but you can use other sorts of paper as well. I particularly like this one. Then when you go over it and wet it out, not only does it get rid of most, and I'll just put that up a little bit more for you, not only does it get rid of most of the marks from the Neocolor, but it also softens the colour, and you can keep softening and adding water just as you would with regular watercolour. So that's salmon. This is the contentious beige, which I love, but like I said, I can't help seeing that as warm grey. And you can keep going, you can blend them together, you can make a third colour. So really 5 colours should be enough. This is just me. This is a me problem. It is nothing to do with anybody else, and it's no reflection on the company. I love all the colours. They make really nice ones too, to be fair, so they're worth collecting. Umber. Again, quite a nice rich brown. And when I wet it out, it's quite watercolour-y, if that's a word. And just to recap, you don't have to wet these out. You can make a whole picture as they are, or you can dissolve one layer and come back in with them dry over the top to put some details in. If you're out and about, that would save carrying pencils of the same colour or same sort of relationships. I've got space here in my studio, so I won't do that, but I do you know, I like to have all sorts of things as well, and like to have different tools for different layers, but you could totally just use the one. They're very, very versatile like that. This is my go-to sky colour, which is the light cobalt blue hue. And you do have to, one thing I find when you wet them out is make sure you've got enough pigment on the paper already. It's a little bit like theatre makeup. You know, if you see a person who's been in a theatre production, if you saw them shopping in the supermarket in that makeup, it would make you drop your shopping basket. It's bright and it's dark and it's heavy because it needs to be, the lights wash it out. This is a bit the same. Bear with me. Analogy works eventually. If you put these down in very light washes, very light strokes when you're at the putting onto the paper dry stage, you look at that and you think, well, you know, that's probably dark enough. I don't want that any darker than that. When you wet it out, you'll find you do lose a bit of its strength. So you've got to go stronger, hence theatre makeup, stronger, because you will wash it out and then there'll be nothing there. You can build up another layer, but it depends on your paper as to how much of that you're going to get away with. This is the English red one. I particularly like this because it goes so well with the salmon and is quite vibrant as well. This one's one that you get a better pigment payoff than some of the others. So here again, not to be contradictory, the take-home message from that is to get to know the individual colours, and as you use them, you swatch them out, see what they can do. Like I said, have a look at the tutorial because I go into a lot of detail. The indigo one, lovely and rich as well, and a slight purple tinge to it, which I quite like as well. I'm very much having a purple, could I say a purple mood or a purple period? Artists have these periods where they do mad stuff, so I'm going to call it that just because it sounds nice. I am going through a very purple period in my work at the moment. Probably because where I live in North Germany, everything is full of heather and it's all going purple at the moment because it's August. Right, those are my favourite 5. And as you can see, for a beach scene, these work really well. To be fair, I could probably do favourite 5s for different favourite 5 for an urban scene, a different favourite 5 for a farmland scene. It depends where you are, but I do want to do a beach scene, and this is a pretty good selection for that. So I've made a preliminary sketch here. And again, we can look at the swatches here to see, and like I said, get to know the individual colours. We know that for the blue, you have to put a reasonable amount down. Sorry about that little glitch. My phone just decided it was going to stop recording and go off completely. So it's all happening. It's Monday. Let's just roll with it. Nothing bad happens. Yes. So as I was saying, for goodness sake, you need to have a look at your swatches. I thought I'd bring the camera down where you could see this a little bit more, but it didn't like it. However, business as usual. You have a look at your swatches. This light blue needs to have more pigment laid down initially, whereas these have a much bigger saturation ability, so we don't need to coat up quite as much in those. So, for example, we will start with this, and this bit is the sort of colouring in stage, pretty primary school. I've got a bit of a rock there on the horizon. So mostly, and we'll just assume that today is just a regular sort of sunny day at the beach, lights coming in from this way. I've got a sun that I cut out here to help us remember that. It's getting a little bit battered at the moment. That's where the light's coming from, so we can sort of see what's going on. You would normally have it a little bit lighter towards the horizon, and you can manage that with the water, or just put less pigment there. One thing you can't do is you can't erase this with an eraser, but you can erase it with water and pat it with a clean cloth and lift it that way. So that works. There are ways and means. So I would then, because I've only got use of 1 or 2 colours here, I'm putting some onto the sea as well, and that is going to be lighter towards the point of the observer. The observer, of course, is standing on the shore here, and because the sea is deeper out here, don't want to stop that quite so abruptly, the sea is deeper out here, I will put more pigment there and less here. I would also come back predictably with the indigo and put that across there. And again, this is a strong one, so you don't need as much, but that's why swatching is super important, because you can't assume it, and you can't tell sometimes from looking at it. I mean, honestly, with these two, you absolutely can. That one is going to be darker than this and probably have more pigment, but sometimes some of the browns, some of the yellows, it's quite subtle. But that's what we've got there. The next thing we do is we put down the lightest colour for the rock. And the other little rocks here as well. This is going to be a challenge to get those the right colour and not all blue. And then we'd put some here as well. Now, the sand in this setting is going to be an apricot colour, but I'm also going to come back here with our beige, just over the top of it, because that will mix another colour. And the trick here is I've not wanted to use any green, and that's really unusual for me as well. So I'm putting beige up this side of this sort of little hillocky thing, and a little bit of the salmon over the top. Now, bear in mind that I'm not doing a finished painting with these. I'm laying down the base layers. What I will then do is dry that and then show you what sort of pencils I would go over the top with. There are lots of ways of getting this job done. This is just how I do it, and that's the whole point of this, is how I would do it. So I'm just putting some odd areas here of Indian red, bit of shade down here, and then with our darker colour, time to tear some paper. Oh, this is exciting. We get to tear some paper off. Honestly, I need to get out more. I'm afraid I'm one of those people that during lockdown, my social life wasn't affected at all, which is really sad when I think about it. Okay, this one here, again, is quite a reasonable amount of strength. So initially, there's going to be a bit of shade just here as well, I've decided. Initially, this is what we've got. And yes, it looks like it. I'm sorry, that was all off the camera. Seriously, let me see if I can go up a little bit. That's better. It's obviously Monday. I do apologise. Here on this rock, a little bit of contouring, and I'm using the umber one again. And on these as well, because of course they're the same things. I mean, basically the way the beach works is sand is made from continually pounding rocks, so it's made up of the same thing. So you're going to have much the same colours. So if a colour occurs on a rock, you can mirror those colours in the sand, because that's sort of how it goes. So a little bit there to mirror that. You might also have a little bit of Indian red, just little bits, because again it's quite strong. Right, so that's what it looks like once I've put that colour down. Now I'm using a number 4 round brush, so nothing particularly fancy. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to find my dome blender. The reason I like this one is because I can scrub with it. If you've seen my other videos, you will see exactly what I mean. So this one's a DecoArt Traditions Dome Blender. Traditions mark on from DecoArt don't actually exist anymore. However, they do have dome blenders. And I am told by a subscriber that Princeton have one, the Princeton brand of brushes. So hopefully where you are, looks like it's got another colour in it there. Hopefully where you are, you can access Princeton brushes. Now, I'm going to have to be a little bit concerned about making sure that that horizon line is neat and tidy. So I can go up to, but not over the top of some of these. Not too fussed about mixing some of the colours, but others, it matters. For example, I don't want too much of that violet in the sky. Right, just blend that out. Blend it out to the horizon. You can also get some movement in the sky. You don't have to have horizontal stripes for everything. And if you come back in with your brush and do some cloud-shaped strokes, you'll get cloud shapes in the sky. Sort of thing. Definitely a bit of green in the brush there. Then here on the beach, and I've gone deliberately quite light because I don't want the sand to be too dark. And what I like about this brush is I can push it as well as pull it, and a lot of brushes just will not put up with that. So a bit of water there, and I want all of this quite mixed in, because this will form, hopefully, the basis of some dried sort of sea grasses and things like that. There's a bit of a red cliff, and this can be blended up to this. A lot of people at the moment are talking about loosening their sketches up. This is a really good way to do it, because you can't use too much precision with this. This brush is not a precision brush. In fact, I may have to swap it. I haven't washed it, by the way, because these colours are the same. So I can still go on using that. Yeah, I may have to swap the brush in a second to see how much precision I can get with this one brush. That's okay so far. These guys are going to test it. I'm going to dip out at this point and get my little round brush, which I have to remember not to scrub with. Also want to get rid of the green marks that I sensibly drew in with. Honestly, obviously one of those mornings. I usually do my initial drawing with watercolour pencil. And the reason for that is that I can remove it as I use this water-soluble medium over the top. Right, okay, just using the clean round brush to get rid of some marks that don't need to be there. So it's not completely permanent. You can basically go over it and fix bits and pieces. I don't mind that bit there that's a little bit blurry on the horizon, funny enough, because that does happen. Sometimes get a sea mist, so that's what I was going for. Absolutely that. Right, that is the substrate of a picture and how I would start the picture using Neocolor II. I'm actually amazed how much different it looks on camera to what it looks in real life. It looks quite light in real life, but on camera it is quite sort of rich. I'm going to go away and draw this, and I shall be back. Dry this, and I shall be back quite shortly. Right, it's lovely and crispy dry, and quite a lot of people say to me that mixed media doesn't work for them. They start out okay with this bit, but when they go to put the colour pencil over the top of it, it doesn't stick, and that's because it's not dry. It's got to be crispy dry, so when it's cool, it's not dry. When it's warm to the touch or room temperature, it is dry. Depending on how much water you've used, may take a little bit longer, and some expensive rag papers will take longer still. So this feels dry, and I dry it both sides. I've got a heat tool, but a hairdryer works as well, but I dry both sides. Right, let's see if we can proceed the next bit without too many sort of slips of the tongue. It's obviously, like I said, one of those days. Now, the sky, you could consider lightening the horizon a little bit more, and I would use a Derwent drawing, Chinese white, if I wanted to do that, just to make some corrections on the horizon and make sure it's nice and light. This is just a sketch in my sketchbook. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a good place to play and get to know the tools, actually. So like I said, Derwent drawing, Chinese white would be the choice there, and I'd keep that one around just in case we need it again a bit closer to the shoreline. The next thing to do is, and I've got a kind of a mixture here. I can see a Derwent Light Fast in there, and I can see another Derwent Light Fast. Those are my two favourites, and the rest are Caran d'Ache Luminance. So I will tell you what colours I'm using, but be aware that you can substitute other brands if you happen to have them wherever you're watching from, because not all brands are available everywhere, sadly. And some places, like if you're watching in Australia, I know I grew up there. The proprietary brand that you get in America and Europe, just in any art shop in Australia, can be ruinously expensive. But there are some pretty good local choices. I can't give you those because I don't know what they are anymore, but you know, just the colours will do. This is dark indigo. Any dark blue, the darkest blue you have, will get the job done. So what I do with that is just going straight over the sea, quite precise along the horizon, as much precision as you can get in a sketch, and then just draw a little bit of dark there. What I'm trying to do is to give the sea a little bit more texture. It's quite nerve-wracking, that bit, actually. I'm giving the sea a little bit more texture and movement based on the colour we've got to start with. And you may say, nobody has yet. I think most people have understood what I'm trying to do here, but just in case, when people say, oh, but you've used more than 5 things, no, I haven't. It's mainly the 5 things are important for the underlayer. You can't do a mixed media artwork with just one sort of medium. It wouldn't be mixed media. So just, I'm sure it's very, very clear, but just in case you were wondering, that's what I'm talking about. These are the 5, and then this is what I would use over the top anyway. And it wouldn't matter what I had used, actually. I end up using these over the top. So, all right, little bit of darkness there. If you are concerned that it's too dark, that's where your white pencil comes in, and you can knock it back a bit. Just make sure there's plenty of variation. There's not a lot of room in this sketchbook to get going, I'm not going to lie. If it was a bigger one, you would be able to do a lot more, but you can't. Right, just making sure that's all in shot. Getting that right's apparently more of a challenge than it needs to be. This is Castle Earth, also Caran d'Ache Luminance. And this is a scratchy one. Everybody who buys Castle Earth says exactly the same thing. It's a pigment related issue, I suspect, because some of them are as creamy as anything. This one isn't. Right, so with this, I'm going to now get some texture quite quickly, remembering that the sun is coming this way. So I want to get some texture on this rock. And that's just a matter of deciding where there might be some lines, and over this side will be a bit darker than the other one. I don't know if you can even hear that. It even sounds scratchier. So that's Castle Earth. And then I would go to Derwent Lightfast Mars Black. Now, this one is a lovely dark brown, but you've got to be careful, because if you go over with a white, it'll come out purple. And that's really useful if you don't mind that. But if you're wanting dark brown, and Mars Black is actually a dark brown, then that's not what you're going to get. So keeping the light to one side, just a little bit of shade there on the other side, bit of texture, that sort of thing. Now I would selectively go over the top of that with, actually, let's see if this one works. This one's burnt ochre 10%. Yeah, it just gives it a little bit of lightness. I don't want too much light. This sort of painting doesn't have a focal point as such. It's just a scene that you might see at the beach. Let's try a little bit of white on here as well, up the top and on this side. You get to the point where it will not accept any more pigment, and that's partly because you've started with a wax. Even if you have dissolved it out, it's still slightly waxy. There are more limits to how many layers you can put over the top of Neocolor II than, for example, watercolour gouache. You can put many more layers, because gouache especially has that very fine, gravelly sort of feel to it. Really fine, I mean, not, you're not going to have absolute lumps. It's very, very fine, but the pencil really likes it. And that's why gouache is my number one standout, no arguments, favourite. So that's all I wanted to do here for the minute, is to just get some colour on those rocks. This is part of this sort of picture, is you do a little bit, you start from the furthest point back and work towards the front in just about every sort of picture of this type. Now, the furthest part is always going to be the sky. Can't get any further out of the picture than the sky. Then the horizon on the water moving forward, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of in the middle of it all. There's a bit of toing and froing, but mostly we can follow those rules. The next thing I want to do is this bit of foreground water here. Strand, I want to say, but an English word would be beach. Yeah, it's definitely Monday. And these beaches, this is a beach in Cornwall in southwest England, and they're pebble beaches. So I'm going to indicate that by just putting some shapes. Some of them I'll fill in, others I'll just indicate. This is a burnt ochre pencil from Caran d'Ache Luminance brand, and I will just go through and make these pebbles in a couple of different colours just to give texture. So that was burnt ochre. The next one I would choose would be raw umber, also Caran d'Ache. because these are the colours, very, very similar to what I've used for the substrate. And where it's darker, like here is some assumed shadow here. Make sure that's on in shot. I do get carried away, and then I realise I'm not actually sitting in my room with just the dog, that there are people watching. So, yeah, that. Right, and over here, down the bottom, a little bit more. Because this is the darkest one we've got so far, over here where it's lighter, I would use less of them. And this one would be burnt ochre 10%. So it is an ally of this one. And that means that it's going to mix together quite nicely, as in visually. This is the lighter one, so we can put this over here. And we can also do some just scribbles, just fill in the space bit there. You might put some in here, but they're not going to show up 100%. Some do. Try it and see is the answer. Right, just fill in that area. I think that would be about the colours I would be using there. Then back to the white, the Chinese white from Derwent Drawing. You can't see much along there. So that is where I would reach for the big guns. Big guns in this situation is an extremely cheap white acrylic paint marker. It's a 0.7mm nib, so it's quite small. And just give it a good shake to mix it up. You can hear the mixing ball actually. And that can go along here. It's not going to show up. How is it? Is it actually even working? That's the next thing. Yeah, it does eventually. It's not happy about the oil slick that I've created, so I'm going to have to nurse it along a little bit there. But sometimes just a little bit of white. I'm not even sure if you can see that on camera. It's there, right there in the middle. But that sort of gives you that line between land and sea. And other than that, you don't have to do very much. Now, over here, this is interesting because I have got a green pencil here, and it's my Derwent Light Fast Forest that I absolutely adore. So we can start with that, because there has to be some green somewhere. I'm an absolute devotee of green. This is a little bit like the Mars Black one. It's forest and it's green, but it looks more grey in some settings. So it's not a proper green. So what I would do here is just get this seagrass going. And cover the whole thing. And as you can see, I'm pushing the pencil, not pulling it. I want the nice, fine, tapered points. Use it quite a bit in here. A bit of scribble. As you can see, this sort of quick sketch is quite suitable for doing outside. And here you can also do some darker pebbles with this, because again, each sort of pencil goes over things differently. Keep this bit nice and shadowy and dark and moody, because even though it is at the beach, what that does then is, if this is nice and dark, it contrasts nicely with the bit that we wanted to be a bit lighter. And to further increase that, we can burnish this area with the side of the white pencil. And that's the Chinese white from Derwent Drawing. And that will give us a little bit of, just a tiniest bit of glare on here, but keep this nice and dark. So forest and maybe Mars Black. This one's the Mars Black that turns purple if you go over it with white. We're not going to do that. We're just filling in more and more of these bits of grass. And the idea is to leave a little bit of space in between each piece of grass so that you can see the underpaintings that you've put in. You can add some of these as well if you think. It's again, up on the table. Yeah, make sure you draw on the table. Please everybody, won't it? Again, I wouldn't put those over here because these are the darker values. So we keep those in the shade to keep pushing the point that that's quite dark. Now, Castle Earth. Nope. Unfortunately, I use Castle Earth only when I'm absolutely forced to because of its grittiness. It just doesn't feel pleasant. But there are plenty of others that do. Carmen Lake is another one. And this is quite breakable too. Quite similar to some of the other colours we've got here, just keeping these russety, almost autumn tones going, sort of autumn at the beach type look. And just a bit of shadow coming into there so that it all looks nicely blended together. Now for this here, that's an anthraquinoid pink. Might be a little bit brash. Let me just see. Actually, no, it works quite nicely for the highlighted half of this because, again, the Carmine Lake is a really nice deep reddish purple. So the anthraquinoid pink could be a lighter version of that. So they kind of work quite well together. If that or anything else does not quite make sense, do leave me a comment and I will make more sense by writing. I'm sure that will work better. I promise. Right, that's that pink. And this one's burnt ochre 10%. I'm not actually sure that we'll see a damn thing. However, it still has a point because it fills in some of the gaps with something that works as a resist. So if we then come... So here, for example, I quite like these light areas. And if we come with this pencil, which you can hardly see, when you go over the top with something darker, it won't go over the top. It's almost as if it preserves that little bit there. It's like a masking fluid in a pencil form. So for example, if I do that, then come through, this one is raw umber. It's falling in the gaps between where I've put the pencil rather than obliterating it completely. Okay. Here too. Just keep on making them nice and feathery there. Now, down here in these areas, if you want to make them still darker, you can glaze with your pencil on its side, and that will glaze some colour in. You can do that with any pencil. Let's try the Carmen Lake because I don't want everywhere that colour. And this sort of fills in and brings everything together. I don't mind a little muddy area in my work. In fact, if you saw some of it, you'd... That's why I like gouache. People say they don't use gouache because it goes muddy. I use it because it goes muddy and work with that. It works nicely for this sort of drama in a picture. Okay, so I would suggest that that's probably approaching finished. I'm just wondering, can we coax any juice out of this at all to make some white pebbles just to fill in here? Yeah, you see, you'll draw on there when you feel like it. The thing with these markers is not only are they cheap, but some of them will dry really lovely opaque white. Others, you've got to go over them a couple of times. So you kind of know that and just work with it. There are bigger ones as well if you prefer, because that's not making much of a difference. But it makes the difference that I needed there. So I don't think I would use any other markers on top of this. You could, of course, you can keep going with markers and build up the colour, and you can also use, let me see if I can just find my food nib. I cleaned up this morning, which was a really stupid idea. This one is an India ink Faber-Castell food nib medium that I constantly go back to use if there's any detail that requires it, because it's quite a nice fine line, but I don't really see any need there. It'll go over everything because it's Indian ink. So if you really wanted to darken the bottom up or put any more fissures into the rock, anything like that, you can use these. Yeah, that looks okay. Let's do that. It's a little bit, but it's not necessary. This will stand exactly as it is. So that is how I would use Neocolor II to paint a very, very simple seascape. And as you see, you don't need to have too many colours. This is a lesson I'm still learning. Trust me, I feel like such a hypocrite. But they are quite nice. They're especially convenient if you're out and about. And do have a look on Amazon for small tins and things like that for things. You only need it to be as long as they are when they're new, which is, I think, about 4 inches, 10 centimetres, 4 inches long, just slightly over, I suspect. Yeah, slightly over, because that's about 4 inches. So as long as they're a little bit over that, you'll find cheap tins just about anywhere like that, and they're really, really good, especially with the window in. But if you can't find them with the window in, you can put a label on it. That works too. But yeah, they work nicely. They're subtle. You can use, the colours are really nice and natural. As in most of these high-end art materials that we use, someone's been thinking about it. You can see quite clearly that thought has been put into it. For example, the Derwent drawing pencils. They are famously colours that you find in North England, where Derwent have their place of manufacture. And you can see, if you go there, why those colours have been chosen, and put the palette into context. It all then makes sense. And yeah, I like that. It's regionally relevant. I mean, we can use them elsewhere too, but yeah, someone has thought very long and hard about which colours to use for the Neocolor IIs. The Neocolor Is, you saw the collection of Neocolor II. This is the entire lot of Neocolor Is. Sorry that that's so in your face there, but you see what I mean. A lot of them are quite bright. Like, I'm never going to use that colour. It's brand new. I bought it because I like the full set of everything. I'll find a way. You can mix them minimally, but this is the entire set of Neocolor I, the non-water soluble one, whereas you saw how many, I've got 10 tins to house the Neocolor IIs. So have a look and see what you can find, and do have a play. They're not particularly expensive for such a high-end product, and I like them. They're worth including in the kit. Right, I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you so much for staying with me this long, and I'm sorry about all the me tripping over my tongue. It happens. I'm not doing this scripted because I don't like the sound of that. I'd prefer to sound like if I was sitting in the room with you, and you know, it happens. So we need to, I'll move on. I hope you got some inspiration from this today, and you learned something that is valuable. Maybe you've got some of these Neocolor IIs stuck away somewhere and think, well, one day I might use them. Get them out, have a play, do swatch. Don't skip the swatching step, because as you can see here, next in context with the picture, there are various different pigment abilities depending on what you've got, and you've got to know them. Otherwise, it's a little bit like cooking and not understanding how hot chili can be. You just can't put a cup of chili in food. You've got to know that it's hot. Colour's the same. You have to understand the ingredients, and swatching is a really good way to understand the ingredients. Okay, like I said, leave me a like, subscribe, and a nice comment if you would like to. And if you like what you see here, have a look at my Patreon. There's lots more on there, and we do all sorts of things. I think we did a sheep last week. That's right. Now I'm going to make the same promise again next week, because my art parcel that I ordered was delayed somehow. It didn't get here on time. So next week I'm going to do an unboxing and a swatching session, just a mini one. There's not a lot of different things, but there are some things that I've never used before or have not used very much. So that is going to be next Mondays. And in the meantime, have fun playing, happy sketching. I hope you get some art time in, and have an absolutely lovely week. See you soon. Bye.